Hello, and welcome to Of the People. We are all Venezuelans now. So the three cornerstones of any free democratic society are free speech, rule of law, and free and fair elections. Democratic societies are like a three-legged stool. Remove any one of those because those are the cornerstones of which everything else flows from. Right? Michael Savage would say that a country is defined by border, language, culture. A democratic society is really defined by freedom of speech, rule of law, and free and fair elections. Remove any one of them, you're standing on two legs, kind of, hard over time. Remove two of them, and standing on one leg doesn't really work. And if you remove all three, then you're trying to transform society, as I think you heard back in, November of 2007, where we're 5 days away from transforming America. So Venezuela just had an election. Well, at least they call it an election. Clearly, most objective observers think that Nicolas Maduro lost, that the conservative opposition won. But of course, the Venezuelan leader is calling that he won, right? And don't forget, Joseph Stalin said, who votes doesn't count. What matters is who counts the vote, right? Which, take a look at Venezuela. So remember, Venezuela, before Hugo Chavez, remember Hugo Chavez was the dictator between 1998 and I want to say it was 2013, give or take, instituted sort of a Bolivian type of, peasant revolution, if you will, took Venezuela from being one of, if not the richest country in South America to probably the poorest and most destitute. His handpicked successor, Nicolas Maduro, now supposedly for a third term. But now you have unrest and riots in the streets. You have the police. You look at some of the videos that are online that are taking off their uniforms and they are joining the protesters in all of this. And political leaders from around the world have pretty much, with the exception of, let's see, Cuba, China, and Russia, no surprise there, have basically said that the elections were rigged and they question these elections. Maduro, for his part, is basically sticking his thumb in people's eyes going, oh, yeah, what are you going to do about it? I control the military. A la the French Revolution, 1789, the military stays loyal to the government. The riots and protests are going to amount to absolutely zero. But it raises the question in this country because we obviously have elections coming up. And of course, rigged elections never happen in this country, and it could never happen here. You sort of have to question things like that because now if you go back with November around the corner, you have certain states, including Georgia, where both Democrats and Republicans have now said we want to get rid of Dominion voting service. We want a paper trail and a paper ballot so we can make sure that we have the election right. Ronald Reagan, back in the day, I'm old enough to remember, basically used the term trust but verify. Now, he was talking about the SALT treaty with Russia, or I think it was SALT II treaty, as I recall. But trust but verify is certainly a mantra that should be adopted for these elections coming up. And free and fair elections is a democratic mantra, along with for the safety of all, along with saving democracy, along with, we need to, trust the science, right? Those are all the mantras in all of this. So remember, the most sacred right that we have is a free and fair election. Giving the people the confidence they need to believe that the elections were free and fair is imperative if we're going to reestablish balance in this country and reestablish trust in government, which in my lifetime is at an all-time low. Because without trust and verify, we're all heading to Venezuela or to become Venezuela, and that right soon. And that's the monologue. Joining us now, author Michael C. Anderson, has 5 books out there, has a 5th book, 4 books out there, has a 5th book coming. The book coming, let me get this right, Michael, The American Counterfeit Democracy. But first of all, welcome to Of the People. I do want to talk to you about your books that are out there first, but welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Glad to have you. So 2 of your books, I want to jump right into this, talk about sort of nature and not nurture, right? One is about the progressive gene, the other is about the conservative gene, right? So for us laymen, what's the difference? I mean, is it really hereditary? I mean, tell me about the whole gene differential.
The differences between liberals and conservatives are genetic, partly, not completely, half genetic and half environmental. But the genetic part is a difference in behavioral traits. Like people's personalities are different. Their political morality is different. One side believes in equality. The other side believes in the status quo, basically. And these are genetic traits that are part of the personalities of these two groups. And you can't turn one into the other. There have been significant studies done, for example, that showed that their brains are different. You can do...
Really?
Yes, you can ask questions with the political overtones and do an MRI or have an MRI running on the brain of the person you're asking the question to. And the part of the brain that lights up in conservatives is different than a part of the brain that lights up in liberals.
Wow.
Conservatives are the part of the brain that determines complex decision making and the attraction to resolving differences, making a complex decision among multiple alternatives. The left is good at. The right part of the right brain that is important is the amygdala. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but that's the fight or flight part of the brain. And amygdalas in conservatives are larger. And
mine must be huge because I'm fight or flight all the time.
All right. Okay. Good. But the point is, conservatives are more circumspect. They make decisions by gut, not by analysis, and they prefer the status quo. This is obvious when you observe conservatives and liberals, and they respect traditions. Liberals like change. They like what's new. They want to push change because they believe that the current world is not as good as it could be. They're very attracted and drawn to equality. So they're driven forward by the desire to make a equality-based society.
So can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah.
One question I would have based on what you're saying is, how much of this is hereditary? Because I grew up in a family that was mostly, to be honest, nature versus nurture, right? I grew up in a family at large, and I'm not just talking about my nuclear family, but the cousins, the aunts, the uncles that were very sort of left of center, whereas and both of my siblings, I'm the youngest of three, both hard left of center, right? Whereas I am obviously, I would say, hard right of center. And so how does that theory of sort of the gene drive, your genes driving some of this, how do you address that or factor that in, that in one family you could have people of different political persuasions?
Remember, you have two parents and each has two set of genes. Right. So you don't know which one you're going to get. Maybe there's a conservative part of one parent that you got and the others didn't. So it's the gene roulette wheel is what you're telling me. Gene roulette, right. But if you look, I've read studies about the number, if you take children that have two conservative parents or two liberal parents, you look at how they grow up, 60 to 65% have the political view of their parents. If parents are different, then obviously that percent goes down. But
I'm remembering
it's
the
very influenced by your parents
from biology.
Right. And also remember, if if your parents are conservative, they probably have friends who are conservative. They may live in a conservative neighborhood. So the environment also has an influence on the genetics and pushes you in a certain direction. Well, but it's not universal.
It's also the way you were describing it. I'm an accountant by trade, for an example. I'm a conservative. I'm an accountant. The risk mitigation is my job. Like, that's what I do for a living for my clients, basically. Even Robert, that is your job too, basically, risk mitigation. And
my real job is insurance. It's risk transfer.
Right. So
risk mitigation.
It's funny that even speaks to what we do for a living. That is this is a fascinating conversation.
Well, let me take you back to prehistoric times because that's a little bit relevant and makes an interesting part of the story.
Okay.
These difference in behaviors developed when the first humans migrated out of Africa and they encountered heterogeneous environments for the first time. Africa was uniform, but
Okay.
coming up into Europe, obviously the climate was different. So human beings had to develop an adaptation to the presence of a good food supply or the lack of a good food supply. So it made sense for behaviors to develop where one group likes to go look for food and the other group would rather manage food. The conservatives are more conscientious and they're better suited to managing the food supply, whereas the liberals are interested in what's new and going off and hunting and finding food. So
wait, the liberals are the hunter-gatherers?
Not necessarily gatherers, but they're the hunters. So
really,
so think about it. If you have both these groups, that enhance the survivability. Because what if you had only one or the other? If you only had liberals, they'd probably all be killed trying to find food. If you had conservatives, they would never look for any food.
It does feel like a little like Chicken Little here, but okay. So let me ask you a question, a very serious question. This is a serious topic, and clearly, you've done your research. You're very learned on this. I come from sort of a visceral, emotional, right or wrong. And I do believe there are not everything in life is relative, right? I do believe that certain things, it's, again, as I use it as an example, former many years ago, Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart, when asked to define pornography, said, I can't define it, but I know it when I see it, right? It's the same thing to me with right and wrong. But help me on something a little more current, historically speaking. When I grew up, from my perspective, Democrats and Republicans basically had the same goals, but they may have disagreed on the path to get there, right? They disagreed on methodology. They disagreed on big government versus small government, but they agreed on the goals. What occurs to me these days is we have been, and maybe this is playing into, one of your other books about tribalism, but what occurs to me is that we no longer have the same goals. And therein lies a major part of the problem. How did we go from assuming my assumption? Let's assume that my presumption or my analysis is correct. How did we go, Michael, from that, where we had the same goals but had different methodologies to get there, to I think we now have very different goals and want very different things?
Right. It's a long process. I mean, of societal changes. The cultural wars. There were at least two large cultural wars in the 70s and 90s, with the left pushing advancing culture in ways that the right wasn't comfortable with, so the right fighting against it. The left invaded academia and heavily controls academia. I'm sure you know that. The statistics are enormously on one side. 90% of professors are on the left. And so their influence on their students influences, the topics that are relevant in society. Everything became politicized, which was key, because the academia used to discuss ideas and then run them through the grinder and spit them out, and then they would be expressed to the public. Now somebody in academia comes up with an idea and it's in the public the next day. So the American society got more and more separated into tribes. The evidence for that in Congress was there used to, this goes to what you were describing, there were always centrists in the Congress who were the compromisers. They would build consensus on both sides, and that's how the country would move forward. All those people left in the 90s. So the only people left are left and right. So you have ideology coming into prominence, and then the extreme expression of the differences between the two foster tribalism. And in my mind, one of the biggest, if not the biggest influences on tribalism is social media, because social media has had such an enormous impact on our society. 25 years ago, you'll agree with me, if you wanted to express a crazy ideology, you had to stand on a soapbox in a park. Now, right. Any crazy man or any normal man with a crazy idea gets an audience, and his position is enhanced based on the controversy of the concept he introduces and the ability to attract other people to that concept. So that just accelerates the divide, pushing each and every American toward one tribe or another. And of course, there are, we talked about the differences, the hunters and the managers of food, but those are people at each end. Obviously, there are independents in the middle, people with personalities that don't favor either conservative or liberal views. They're open to ideas. They're flexible. They're not ideological. So they're independent voters. So it's really a spectrum of political morality from right to left and everything in between.
This is so connecting this idea that, we kind of inherently have these biological differences, right? Nature versus nurture, whatever. But we have these natural differences. And now we're being more and more and more divided, right? So it's like the media and all of the institutions are sort of feeding off of that division to for whatever maybe their purposes aren't nefarious. Maybe they're just greedy or whatever.
Wouldn't that wait? That would make them nefarious.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that's still nefarious.
I think you're nefarious.
Right, right. Yeah, and by the way, I'm not greedy. It's always the other guy that's greedy.
It's
right?
definitely everybody else but me.
It's everybody else
for sure.
But
like, so we know these things, right? We see it. We kind of see what's happening. Now, how do we keep from tearing each other apart, right? How can we, as the farmers, appreciate the hunters, right? We're
already tearing each other apart. I think what I'd like to ask Mike, and I think that's where you're going, Ericka, is how do you heal the divide? Because to me, where there is no middle.
We're so different.
Well, we're polarized, right? I mean, we're divided right from left, black from white, rich from poor, men from women. We're divided into so many, let's call them tribes. I may not be using your definition of the word accurately, Mike, but talk about that. What happened to the middle, and how do you put it all back together again? Can you?
Well, and here, Mike, you're going to save that answer for when we come back from a break.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, we're going to hear about Israel Appreciation Day. And then when we come back, we're going to hear from our guest author, Mike Anderson, about how do we start to heal things? How do we start to fix it? All right.
Why Israel Appreciation Day? Because no one is telling the Israel story about why Israel's existence is so important, not just as a Jewish state and not just as an ally of the United States, but for all the positive achievements Israel has contributed to the world in science, technology, medicine, human rights, religious freedoms, rule of law, democracy, and so on. We need to start winning the public relations information war and change the narrative, especially among our younger generations. We need to get the information out there and arm those people who understand the seminal importance of Israel to the world. And being the Jewish homeland doesn't begin to tell that story of why Israel is so important. It's something we all can come together on, and honestly, it's something we all must come together on. It is imperative the general public understands the nature of the very special relationship between Israel and the United States and Israel's importance to the world. So please join us on September 18th in Washington, D.C. as we celebrate Israel Appreciation Day. You'll also be able to find us live on all the streaming channels, including Roku, Apple TV, Dish Network, and others. Because never again is now.
All right. And we're back with author Michael C. Anderson.
Mike, how do you heal the divide, right? We went to break. We are so polarized. If there's a middle, they left the game board. Maybe there's still a middle, but they left the game board. How do you put Humpty Dumpty back together again?
Very good question. My tribalism book was published in 2019, and the last chapter offers 3 ways to get rid of tribalism. I haven't changed my mind since then. Let's run through those. The first and most obvious one is if any single event happened that would unite the country, we wouldn't be tribal. Let's say like a 9/11. And I don't wish a 9/11 on our country. I don't wish anything like that trauma, but that certainly would fix tribalism because it would redirect everybody's focus on what the country needs instead of what individual groups need. When COVID came, I thought that was going to be the answer because here you have a pandemic affecting all Americans, and we would unite and work together to solve the pandemic, and it immediately became polarized. So it failed, unfortunately. My other 2 suggestions are, one is that it'll end because everybody will be too exhausted to continue. Because at some point, it's
Exhaustion.
It's really ridiculous when you think about this arguing over ideology, because it stands in the way of government functioning. I mean, by having this internal argument between left and right, that offsets whatever the government's going to do in a positive fashion, not to mention the fact that Americans are not united behind any objectives that can influence government. So we just sit here and spin. So Americans are wasting their time arguing about ideology when ideology shouldn't matter. Politics should be practical. We should be able to have a consensus about what's important and move forward.
But how do you do that when there's no dialogue? Look, one of my arguments here, I understand your point, and you make a really good point. But part of the problem to me is, to be very candid, is that Republicans are only talking to Republicans. Democrats are only talking to Democrats, right? Everybody's in this echo chamber. And while I agree with you, I think social media has really sort of exacerbated on steroids, or exacerbated exponentially, the divide in this country, right? Or the tribalism, as you call it. I think it started with 24/7 news, right? Where when everything's important, nothing's important. And we have, in an attempt to sanitize the political process, which is inherently not a sanitized, not something that should or could be sanitized, in my opinion, you prevented, I mean, look, Ted Kennedy, the Prince of Darkness to Republicans, and Strom Thurmond, the arch conservative from, I think it was North Carolina, disagreed on many things, but they worked together where there was commonality. And frankly, they were friends. Tip O'Neill, Ronald Reagan. There's plenty of examples in history, but where's the middle now? Where are they? And how do you breach that divide? Because in theory, I agree with you, but Democrats are only talking to Democrats. Right. Republicans are only talking to Republicans.
This is a great setup for my next answer. Thank you.
Good. You're welcome.
The third solution potentially is grassroots organization that start a dialogue between the 2 parties and move forward that way and spread. One of those organizations you may or may not heard of is called Braver Angels. I'm a member of Braver Angels. It's about 30 to 40,000 people who have
don't know it.
Local chapters. braverangels.org is the website. There are local chapters in almost every American city, and it's very inexpensive to participate. And each chapter has monthly meetings where people indicate whether they're red or blue. So you have a room full of reds and blues, and you have a general discussion, and then you break up into small groups, either 1-on-1 or 2-on-2 or whatever it is, and you review issues and talk about politics. You might talk about abortion. You might talk about the border. But the idea is, first of all, to to get to know a person on the other side of the aisle and realize, first of all, they're a good person. They're not an ogre like you hear about. And then,
Are you sure? Are you sure they're not ogres, Mike?
yes, positive.
You tested this. You've tested this for yourself at these meetings.
Yes, I have.
Okay.
And then once you have a familiarization process, you dive into the issues. One person introduces one issue, and the other person introduces another. And the idea is to talk about what drives your opinion about that particular issue, and can you come to a consensus? And I've been at 7 or 8 of these, and consensus isn't very hard. Let's take something as controversial as abortion, because I think it's 68% of conservatives think some abortion should be allowed with limits. So even though the left would say no one on the right, everybody on the right wants it completely prohibited. But I had a discussion in one meeting with somebody who was radically, I would say very close to a communist. But we got to an abortion agreement in a reasonably short amount of time. Now, part of it is I call myself I'm a conservative genetically, but I'm a moderate politically, because I believe that you have to do things that will really work, and to stand on ideology and keep the country from moving forward is not a good idea. So those discussions go forward. The group is doing great and it's growing. The only problem is, and my standard joke when I talk about Braver Angels is, the people that need to be in it aren't the ones that are in it. The people that are in it.
Yeah, I need drug rehab, but I'm not going. I get it. No.
The people are in it are open to dialogue, and they're open to building consensus.
Yeah. And it seems like if nothing else,
Eric,
oh no, thank you. It seems like if nothing else, it's an opportunity to practice having these conversations in a safe environment. Right.
And there's a code of conduct. Don't raise your voice. Don't use any name calling. That you agree to abide by when you're part of the organization. And
they'd kick me out. They would kick me out right away. They would kick. Not the name calling. If I called someone dumb, is that name calling?
Yes.
Okay, I can't do that. I can't do that. Mike. So here's my question, which is, I hear what you're saying, and what it sounds like is that if this type of an organization, 40,000 is a big number, but you need 4 million, right? We're a country of what, 325 million, or 40 million. Until the let's call it the moderate center reclaims the political process and becomes the integral fulcrum of deciding elections, which I don't think they are anymore. Then both sides, I think, would vie for, lack of a better term, control or supremacy, hegemony, whatever word you want to use with that. So I think in theory it's a great thing. I think you're right. The wrong people are going to those meetings because the people, it's sort of self-selection. If they're going to the meeting, they're open to compromise to begin with. The ones that are not open to compromise are not going to the meeting anyway. And I want to, however, segue, because your new book is coming out, America's Counterfeit Democracy. Integrate that in this kind of a conversation. What is America's counterfeit democracy, and how does it play into sort of this disappearing middle, if it does?
Okay. Well, we've spent the hour so far talking about tribalism. We've talked about what caused it and how to fix it and what it is and all that stuff. And I made the comment about, if we're tribal, we can't influence government action because we're fighting with each other. So when I started thinking about the 5th book, I thought about, well, do we really have control after all? And I decided, I did a lot of reading about it, and I read the history of theories of elite power and all that stuff. And I decided that we don't have control right now.
Control of what?
Control of the federal government is controlled by elites, is what the book is about. And the public has very little influence over government action, and there's data on that. For example, someone did a study where they looked at various issues, all the issues being introduced in front of Congress, and which ones were the elites interested in, and which ones were the public interested in, but the elites weren't. So if you look at that data, you find that issues the public only is interested in have about a 5% chance of becoming law. Whereas if the elites are interested in, no matter what the public thinks, they have a 79% chance of becoming law. So that's like a little factoid about what our influence really is. The elites, the term I use in my book, and it's not, I didn't invent this term, it was invented by somebody else, is the power elite. And the power elite are wealthy families who engage in politics, because they're wealthy families that don't engage in politics. They just ride around yachts. But the ones that do are in affiliation with large corporations. They either own them, or they have high stakes in them, or they serve on the boards of directors of those companies.
So you're talking about an oligarchy.
Yeah, basically. And maybe depending on how you define oligarchy, I mean, there's probably,
of course,
1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 power elites in the country. It's not 10, but there's
like
this
delegates.
There's this whole policy planning network that the power elites use to develop policies, which then they feed to the government to influence the government. So they have their own think tanks and research people that develop the policies that fit in with their objectives, and then those policies are fed to the government. The power elites also have significant role in the executive branch, because if you look at like the Treasury Department or Department of State, all the people on there are Ivy League educated. They've been consultants, they've been elected officials, they've been corporate leaders and all that. So they're in positions to directly influence government action that way. The elites
it's like
have
a pipeline basically through the education, whether like the Ivy League colleges and so forth.
Yep.
And if I recall correctly, there's a couple thousand super delegates in the Democratic Party that are going to help, for example, subvert democracy this year, if I may be so bold as to claim
what
that.
Saying is that we have strayed from our moorings and our foundation, where the power is supposed to flow with the consent of the government from the bottom up. And Michael, we've argued here on this show that there really isn't as much distinction between left and right as there is top and bottom.
It's a uniparty.
Right.
Yes.
Got it. So when is your new book coming out?
Mid-September.
And where can they find what's your website? Where can they find you? And people who want to contact you?
MikeAndersonsBooks.com. So it's Anderson with an S, books with an S.
And people watching the podcast, we just pulled his screen up, and you see this book on tribalism, the progressive gene.
Yep.
You go down to the conservative gene.
Yep.
And the twilight. I hope, by the way, Mike, we're not in the twilight of the American experiment. That would that would be depressing.
That would make me sad.
Yes.
That would make me sad.
Well, that's why we have to do something about it.
Yes. Yes. We do have to do something about it. Just like we need to go to break, ladies and gentlemen. So if you like what you have been hearing, if you appreciate the content, go ahead and give a like on this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to this channel. And make sure to go check out author Mike Anderson, who's been our guest today. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Please come again.
See you later.
Why Israel Appreciation Day? Because no one is telling the Israel story about why Israel's existence is so important, not just as a Jewish state and not just as an ally of the United States, but for all the positive achievements Israel has contributed to the world in science, technology, medicine, human rights, religious freedoms, rule of law, democracy, and so on. We need to start winning the public relations information war and change the narrative, especially among our younger generations. We need to get the information out there and arm those people who understand the seminal importance of Israel to the world. And being the Jewish homeland doesn't begin to tell that story of why Israel is so important. It's something we all can come together on, and honestly, it's something we all must come together on. It is imperative the general public understands the nature of the very special relationship between Israel and the United States and Israel's importance to the world. So please join us on September 18th in Washington, D.C. as we celebrate Israel Appreciation Day. You'll also be able to find us live on all the streaming channels, including Roku, Apple TV, Dish Network, and others. Because never again is now.
And we're
back. And never again is now. And for those people not paying attention to the news, right, a few days ago, Hezbollah in Lebanon sent missiles into northern Israel, killing, I heard 9 or 12 young children. And by the way, these weren't Jewish children. These were Druze, right? Because Israel is a country where doesn't matter your religion, you're welcome to live in the country as long as you live in peace. Israel, in return, just fired missiles into Lebanon in retaliation, taking out the command headquarters where the missiles came from. So never again, ladies and gentlemen, is now, right? And don't forget that Israeli values are American values, right? And it's about Western civilization. But I want to get back to our guest, Mike Anderson. What a deep thinker he is.
Yeah.
Go to his website, Mike Anderson's plural. That's books.com. In a much more scholarly and intelligent fashion. He's saying basically what we've been saying for a long time, which is the uniparty. There is really no left. I mean, there is left and right, but that whole tribalism, what we call, demagogue, demonize, and divide, right? That when you divide the country into little groups, then the power elite, as he calls them, can sort of have their way or hold sway, and that government doesn't respond to the people. Government now dictates to the people. And again, I'm not trying to put words in his mouth, but I think we were sort of saying close to the same thing. Like I said, he was much more scholarly about it.
It's the thing that that you just don't know how to put words to it, right? And I think we all know that if you don't have money and you don't know people, that you can get totally screwed and hosed. Like, I don't need a degree to know that, but he made it like this is how you say it in like English.
Right, as opposed to you and I, so we're more street than that. At least I am. I look good. But I sound like I'm on the street. But I want to segue though to something. Right, we're sort of going into our WTO. Where's the outrage?
Yeah.
Did you see the protests in Philadelphia from the Reactionary Communist Party of America?
Well,
you didn't see
part? The part where they attacked the police, or wait, was that the one that was?
No. So this is 2 days ago. It was the founding Congress. I'm sorry, of the Revolutionary Communists of America. We're a party of class fighters committed to complete overthrow of capitalism. We fight the world of material superabundance and reject the art. I mean, it goes on and all this crap. But the one thing that I would love to have asked our guest about is, because taking out sort of the good versus evil component, which in my mind, there is that, but I'm not sure that he would agree with that. But to me, the left has a very different agenda, which is to transform the country. And whether they know you're moving, towards socialism or communism, and my thoughts. The minute you say the word socialism or communism, people's eyes glaze over and they roll back in their head.
Yeah.
But I mean, we used to jail communists in this country, right, for subversion, right, for being I forget the term, but basically
being a traitor. Basically,
being traitor to the United States. I mean, ask Eugene Debs, who in the 1920s was the head of the Communist Party. They jailed him. He still ran for president, obviously lost. And, so to me, and then you juxtapose that with, there was did you see the White Dudes for Harris?
Oh, God.
Event rally?
God. Yeah.
So, but the interesting thing about that, which was hardly anybody showed up. I don't know if it means white dudes aren't supporting her or what, but Tim Ball, I think his name is Walz, the Minnesota governor, when asked about all of this, basically said, well, one person's socialism is another person's neighborliness, right? So you juxtapose, which basically means that, well, socialism is like
What?
neighborliness.
Wow.
This is a governor of Minnesota, and I juxtapose that with the fact that you now have avowed communists on the streets, right? Which is a threat to American. And look,
so
if
wait,
we
a
agree on
system
the
of economics is the same as neighborliness? I can't.
It's neighborliness.
I'm sorry. Keep going.
Governor Walz of Minnesota said that,
So he doesn't know English.
like
Got it.
Well, cleanliness is next to godliness, right? Socialism is next to neighborliness, right? One man's socialism is another man's neighborliness.
Economic system of theft is the same as being nice to your neighbor.
Right.
I wonder if Jesus would agree.
Well,
Okay. So hold on. So backing up.
Not to blaspheme, but it's the whole turn the other cheek thing. I still have a hard time wrapping my head around. Unless, of course, you're going to turn the other cheek and give them a backhand as you come around. So, I don't know.
I can't understand
Is this a new set of lips? You have a new set of lips today. Oh.
I just can't. I never am ceased to be amazed at how politicians and media pundits will just outright lie through their face right to the American people.
Why wouldn't they? There are no consequences.
There's no accountability.
There's no accountability. Look at Venezuela. Nicolas Maduro is going to survive. He is going to be the president. He stole the election. Even
everybody
Anthony
knows
Blinken
it.
said, and everyone knows it. And he's going like, yeah, what are you going to do about it? I control the army.
Literally.
So
That's literally what he said. And
Right.
then we have, and hold on. So you can have a group of people called the Revolutionary Communists of America who are saying they want to overthrow capitalism. But a bunch of J6ers who did a tour of the Capitol are treasonists. I can't.
Right. I want Lord Benjamin to pull up the picture. Just look up Revolutionary Communists of America, RCA, and you can put it up. And look, when I say there were only 300 of them, but you got 300 people marching in Philadelphia preaching the overthrow. I mean, is it any different than you have, the pro-Hamas, protesters saying death to America? I mean, at some point you cross a line here. And if you don't understand that the enemy is inside the gate, and it's not the enemy's left to right, it's the enemy's top to bottom. It's the enemies of sort of the American exceptionalist institution, because this still is the great experiment.
Hold on, is this what you wanted me to bring up? Wait, is this the
Joe Biden? No, that's Joe Biden.
Revolution.org. No, I got the wrong thing.
No, it's called Revolutionary Communists of America.
Okay, hold on. Ben gave me another link.
Come on, let's get that link right. It's just in the news yesterday. I don't know about that. Come on, where are we? There we are.
Oh,
Thank you. Right. Wow. So they're marching in Philadelphia, but again, you've got to juxtapose it. You have a governor of a state, Minnesota, going, well, socialism is people call it neighborliness. Like, what?
That's wild, bro. That's not neighborliness.
And look, I'm a student of history. I may not be a smart student of history, but I'm a student of history. I defy anybody to show me one country where socialism has bettered the lot.
They just didn't do it right. They just didn't do it right, Robert.
Yeah, I know. They didn't go far enough.
Why are you such a bigot?
Now you sound like Bernie Sanders. Well, the only reason it failed is because we didn't go far enough. Where's my brown burlap sack? We should all wear brown burlap sacks. And
if you're not in a bread line, you're not in a socialist country. Okay.
And then you go back to what we started with, right? That free speech, rule of law, and election integrity are the cornerstones of every democracy. And I'm sorry that Mike Anderson couldn't stay with us, or we didn't have the time, because at the end of the day, I wanted his take on are we really in a democracy now, right? Because again, well, first of all, we're not really a democracy to begin with, right? We're a constitutional republic, that kind of thing. But just to get his take on that, because rule of law, as you and I've talked about, before we're anything, constitutional republic or democracy, we're a nation of laws. If you want to fundamentally transform a country, right, first you topple old statues and you rewrite history, and then you get rid of the laws, or you make the laws sort of, you neuter the laws and just don't follow them, same thing. And then you get rid of the people who enforce the laws. And then after you're done with man's laws, you go after God's laws and you convince people there's not 2 genders, there's 12. And I still want, and no, Ben, do not pull up the, the Minotaur picture of Robert this time. But so, yeah, I know I would have loved, to ask him some more questions, but it's just, I look at the governor of Minnesota going, well, socialism's like neighborliness. What?
Yeah. Oh,
can I
Ben
call him
gave
dumb?
me, what's that?
He loaded
Ben's,
it into the brand.
Yeah, hold on. He sent another video. Hang on. Let's see.
Come on.
Yeah, this is. Yeah, they're doing the most.
Now, by the way, I'm for free speech. I am an old school liberal in the sense that, I grew up with the following saying that I may disagree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. Right. That's the way I was brought up. Yeah. That has limits, though. You can't yell fire in an open theater. You can't preach overthrow of the country. You can't say death to America and death to Israel. Where's the line here?
How are they getting away with this and grandmas and grandpas are still in jail? Okay, this is
because one man's terrorist is another. One man's terrorist.
I'm not talking about people who are like, attacking cops and doing terrible things, but there are people that have been held in prison. Okay, prison for doing nothing but trespass, getting charged with all kinds of nonsense, and yet we can have. Okay, look here, Robert. Okay, here, real talk. Question for you.
Do you want me to take? There's a question here?
Yeah. So we've got the Democrat, the Republican, revolutionary communists.
We call them the autocrats, by the way.
The autocrats are marching, saying they're going to overthrow the government.
Right.
That is okay, but the white nationalists are terrible, awful, horrible human beings. And look, wait a minute. There are 4 democratic mantras, right? What are the 4 democratic mantras, right? For the safety of all, trust the science, right? we have to save democracy and free and fair elections. Those are the 4 Democrat mantras, right? Trust the science, free and fair elections, for the safety of all, right? And so the J6ers violated free and fair elections, even though, especially now when you look at what's going on in Georgia, and they're going to throw out Dominion voting, systems. At least that's what both the Dems and the Republicans are talking about. And by the way, that's the other thing. Why is it the 3rd largest state in the country, Florida, can get elections done in one day, and all these smaller, piddly ass little states take a week? And then the vote count changes, right? It's like, get the elections done today and trust but verify and have a paper trail so you can verify the vote. All we want is trust but verify. That's it, right? You want to use computers, it's fine. But there has to be a paper trail to be able to verify, or people are not going to have faith that the elections are free and fair. And January 6th went after one of the Democrat mantras, which was free and fair elections. Well, hey, okay, so here? I know you have some plans for the show today. Are we going to get to that Zach Sage thing? The kid who went to Israel, the young man who went over to Israel. Are we going to cover that today?
I would love to go. So what she's talking about is
we got like 10 minutes left.
Perfect. A young influencer named Zach Fox did the Gaza University videos, I think. Remember at the height of the protests, Ericka, in New York City, he went around and he interviewed all these students about what you were protesting on and what does from the river to the sea mean. They had no flipping clue what any of this was. So I got to give the guy credit. He has big, gabions, right? He's because he goes to Israel. Not only do he's Jewish. I don't know if he's gay or not, but he certainly, I think he is. Wears nail polish and whatever, and I don't really care. I'm just saying, you don't want to go into West Bank, which is what he did, being Jewish, being gay, being whatever. So he hid his identity. His passport doesn't say that he's Jewish, just says he's American. He went through this thing where, I look in the mirror. If I dress, a little differently, I'll look like I'm Italian. He walks into the West Bank. He's got a producer and a cameraman with him, right? I mean, the kid's got, big, a big set to do this, right? Walks in. And remember, Israelis cannot go into the West Bank or Gaza. They're not allowed. Yet people from West Bank and Gaza, they're vetted, can come into Israel. So he goes in and he starts interviewing everybody because he's hoping to find sort of that moderate voice about people who don't hate Israel in the West Bank, of people who don't, support Hamas. And he couldn't find it. And then what ends up happening, and I don't know, do we have this video clip up? And then he gets threatened by a bunch of Palestinian guys because he's interviewing a woman, and then he had to erase the video. I mean, but what it showed you was that one woman said, "Oh yeah, we believe in a one-state solution. Get rid of Israel. No, we shouldn't release the hostages. No, there was no one killed. There were no Israelis killed on October 7th.
Wow. And
we love Hamas." He couldn't find a single person. This is like God and Lot. Right, yes. Sodom and Gomorrah, which I'll save Sodom or Gomorrah if you can find one good person. Right, he couldn't find one. Play the video. Do we have it up?
He's getting the shorter edited version loaded. But think about that, you guys. Think about that. Because this is one of the things that I had questioned was, well, maybe they're too afraid. Maybe they're too afraid to say what they really think on camera. Maybe it's this or that or whatever. But even in that case, if they're too afraid to tell what they really think, if they're too afraid to tell tell the truth, doesn't that also tell you something? So either they're telling you the truth or they're lying because they're afraid, which also means that it's bad and not good. And so, y'all, I'm not saying that everything that the country or the government of Israel has ever done is okay, right? I'm not saying that. What I am saying is, that maybe.
What are you saying? What are you saying?
This is what is so hard, because no one wants to see anyone hurt. No one wants to see human beings suffer. And so there is this inherent emotion where you feel for people, and then you just go, I don't. What are
you saying? What are you saying?
How does I don't understand what I don't Hamas not fight back?
Wait a minute. So Mike Anderson even said that sort of the left has taken over the education of the youth, right? And then you have generations where it's inculcated in their values. They're teaching their children to be suicide bombers, and then that's okay. They're teaching their children to hate Jews, and then there's UNRWA, right?
How do you fight people that do that stuff? You don't want to hurt people, but what do you do when that's how they're raised and that's the society?
Look, this is really simple, and I've said this until I'm blue in the face. If Hamas lays down their arms, there would be no war. If Israel lays down her arms, there would be no Israel, right? And I know that sounds like a trite saying, but it's the truth. This is still a defense action, right? And if I know you're going to try to hurt me and I can take you out earlier, whether I'm in a bar fight or something else, then you preemptively strike those people. And by the way, Hezbollah, the war just widened. Now they're getting missiles out of Lebanon. And let's be clear.
To do?
Let's be clear. Hezbollah is Iran's main proxy in the world outside of the Iranian army. And by the way, you have the Turkish leader Erdogan, or how do you pronounce that? Erdogan basically said that he's thinking of sending troops into Israel, to fight against,
God.
So this is first of all, thank you, Joe Biden, right? This is weakness breeds aggression. International politics. Look, there are bad actors out there, and Russia and China and Iran are the whatever axis you want to call them, but they're, what's the word, in cahoots? I mean, oh, by the way, here's the other thing. Do you know that they found Chinese had helped Hamas build their tunnels? There's evidence now that China has been helping Hamas build tunnels.
Bro?
So you want more evidence?
Come on.
Right?
Come on. How can you even argue this crap anymore? Or they? Right. How can they argue this? Okay. So we've got the video edited. Yeah, we've got it edited down to 2 minutes.
The dream would be that there's a two-state solution, at least for me. However, once I got there, I realized that dream seems further than ever.
Do you want to live with the Israelis in peace? Or?
No, I want one-state solution. No Israel.
So no more Israel?
Yes.
Israel wiped off the map?
Palestine fakat.
We should delete Israel. So you would not be okay with a two-state solution?
Of course not.
Things got very contentious very quick once we hit the streets. The second we hit the streets, it was like one after another. Massive love and support for Hamas, to the point where there's a comedic bit we added in the thing where I was like, okay, have me wandering through the streets and get some B-roll, because I know I'm going to want to add some audio over of just being like, where does anyone not support Hamas? And he starts bringing more Palestinian men over. They start screaming in Arabic, and I'm still just trying to be a professional and go on and interview people. And eventually my producer tells me he's threatening to hurt us if we don't delete the footage. And then that violence turned into death threats. I'm like Larry Daviding this thing. I mean, it was like out of an episode of a Dark Curb, where, literally they're like screaming in Arabic. My producer's telling me we have to delete the footage. And I'm like, just here asking questions. Everybody gave me their consent to be on camera. Even the girl that you're upset I'm talking to fully gave consent to be on camera. I told her right off the bat she didn't have to answer anything she didn't want to. And then the Arabic started getting louder. More men start coming. And eventually I caved because my cameraman tells me they're threatening to kill us. I'm terrified for my life right now. It was a pretty eye-opening experience. I mean, yeah, we really bolted out of Palestine with as much footage as we had.
What else do you need to hear? Like, journalists get death threats. And here's the thing. If you have a just cause and you feel so good about it, why are you threatening journalists?
Wait a minute, Ericka. So, and I say this respectfully because I love you, right? And we've been doing the show a long time. Trying to reason with that kind of thinking is like the West trying to reason with the mullahs in Iran. Their worldview is different. It is impossible to have a sort of a Western rationalized conversation when, as far as they're concerned, it's okay to martyr yourself, right? And be a suicide bomber in the name of, in the name of God, basically, right? That's what they're saying. So can't have a Western rationalized conversation. And that's why I'm going to end this with the whole Israel Appreciation Day. That's why Israel Appreciation Day is so important, because there's a reason that all the international press bureaus have their bureau in Jerusalem, because that's where there's freedom of the press. There's a reason. But think about it. There's a reason, right? If you're gay, if you're LGBTQ, if you have an alternative lifestyle, try that in any country in the Middle East, except for Israel. Rule of law. There's rule of law and there's Sharia law. There's capitalism, and then there's sort of an Islamic economy, which is structured very differently. And then you look at all the medical and technological advances and all the good work that Israel's done around the world. Companies like Innovation Africa, that for 10 years, nobody knows about it outside of Israel, of course, and in Africa, where they've been bringing, clean water and energy to Africa for 10 years to improve their lifestyle. Those are the things that when you see that kind of a video, you cannot reason with them. You cannot have a rational discussion, because as far as they're concerned, the only good Jew is a dead one. And what people also don't understand, I had a friend who's evangelical, which I guess you're telling me, is that part of the Protestant denomination? I never understood the distinction, but basically said Christians and Jews have to stick together because they're coming after us both.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's the deal.
Right. That's right. And speaking of coming after us, the deadline to the end of the show is coming after us very quickly.
Really?
Yes.
Drum roll, please.
Da 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 da. Ladies and gentlemen, this is where I say, if you have been watching the video for this long, we thank you. And if you liked it or you hate it, we'd love your engagement. So give us a like, share it, tell everybody that we are great, or tell everybody how dumb we are. all the engagement counts. Most importantly, though, if you are subscribed, hit the notification bell so that you never miss an Of the People episode.
Of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from this earth. You have my word.
Amen.